All right, so moving on to the next segment, we're going to pivot here to the world of MMA inside the UFC world. In this next segment, I'll be sharing my fight prediction for the fight that will be taking place in the UFC this weekend between Ian Garry and Carlos Prates. So this should be a highly anticipated welterweight fight that will be taking place this weekend at UFC Fight Night between these two respective welterweight fighters. Ian Garry and Carlos Prates will be getting the main event slot at UFC Fight Night. So I'll be sharing my storylines heading into this highly anticipated welterweight fight. So these are my storylines heading into the fight. Can these respective welterweight fighters take advantage of this huge opportunity at this fight at UFC Fight Night? Because Ian Garry and Carlos Prates were not scheduled to be the main event of this UFC Fight Night event. It was originally supposed to be a light heavyweight fight that was supposed to take place in the main event slot between Khalil Roundtree and Jamal Hill. That fight was scrapped due to the fact that Jamal Hill got injured during camp and is unable to go for UFC Fight Night that will be taking place in Kansas City, Missouri. Therefore, UFC moved quickly, and a big welterweight fight has now taken the main event slot between Ian Garry and Carlos Prates. So this is going to be a huge fight, and now both welterweight fighters not only have a chance to pick up a big win and solidify themselves at this welterweight division, but they have a chance to possibly crack in the top 10, top 5 of this loaded welterweight division that is slowly starting to show new stars and show the star power what this welterweight division truly has. So there's some big names here, a little different. I guess it's a change of guard now, since guys like Kamaru Usman or Leon Edwards or George Masvidal and guys like that, they're starting to fade away in this welterweight division. Now you're starting to see the new up-and-coming welterweight fighters take place and shine at this welterweight division. Guys like Ian Garry, Carlos Prates. So we're going to be seeing a highly anticipated fight heading into this UFC Fight Night main event. But one of the storylines I also have is, how will Ian Garry bounce back after suffering his first MMA career loss against Shavkat Rakhmonov in the co-main event of UFC 310. Now, that was a really close fight. I had that score 3-2 in favor of Shavkat Rakhmonov. The right man won that fight. But I want to see how Ian Garry can learn from that experience, bounce back from his first MMA loss. And I want to see how he steps into the octagon against Carlos Prates in the main event of UFC Fight Night this weekend. And I truly believe that Ian Garry, his ceiling at the UFC is very high. I think he could be the next Ireland fighter, the next Ireland star, I should say, from Ireland. The next Ireland star from Ireland. And someone that rings a bell is obviously Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor had the aura, the MMA style to make fans invest in him. Ian Garry's not the most flashiest fighter. He doesn't put away opponents by finishes quite often, but he has the aura, he has the MMA skills, and he's starting to gain the experience to be that next big thing at this welterweight division. You just got to put the wins together and bounce back from his first MMA loss against Shavkat Rakhmonov. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he will approach this fight against Carlos Prates in the main event of UFC Fight Night. Now, for Carlos Prates, can he capitalize on this opportunity? Now, Carlos Prates, if you guys have followed MMA outside the UFC world, Carlos Prates has been on an impressive overall 11-fight winning streak in his MMA career right now. He's riding a wave of momentum, and ever since he joined the UFC, he's currently on a 5-fight winning streak. So the man is hot as a forest fire on his quest to being the next big thing possibly at this welterweight division. And if he could defeat Ian Garry at UFC Fight Night and put him away in dominating fashion, I think he could crack in the top 5. But if he could at least defeat Ian Garry, I think that puts him at least top 10 at this welterweight division. And a welterweight division, I think there's nobody that separates themselves right now from the champion Bilal Muhammad, Sean Brady. I don't think anybody really separates themselves from the pack right now. I think this welterweight division is stacked with a lot of talented fighters. And a victory, a statement victory against Ian Garry, if you could finish him off in the first 2 rounds, if you get the decision victory, I think that can go a big way for Carlos Prates and his stock at the welterweight division. But he needs to get a victory somehow, some way against Ian Garry. I want to see how he approaches this fight for UFC Fight Night. But enough of the storylines. Let's get into the tail of the tape here. Starting off with Carlos Prates. Carlos Prates has 21 victories, 6 losses to his UFC career, or to his MMA career. He has 16 victories coming away of knockout, 3 submission victories. Currently the 13th ranked welterweight fighter at this welterweight division. Stands at 6'1" with a reach of 78 inches. Then I'm looking at Ian Garry. Ian Garry, he has a MMA record of 15 wins, 1 loss to his resume. 7 victories come away of knockout, 1 submission victory. Currently the 7th ranked contender at this welterweight division. Stands at 6'3" and has a reach of 74.5 inches. So the height advantage goes to Ian Garry, but the reach goes in favor of Carlos Prates. We're going to see how these respective fighters handle that once they get into the octagon with each other at the main event of UFC Fight Night. But let's get into the game plans if these respective fighters want to walk out of the main event of UFC Fight Night with a victory, and some implications of rising up this welterweight division. Starting off with Carlos Prates. Carlos Prates, I think game plan number 1, he needs to stuff the takedowns. And overall, Carlos Prates, from what I've seen from his previous fights and what I've seen from the tape, since joining the UFC, he has been a phenomenal fighter in terms of stuffing takedowns. And I think he's been really good at that since joining the UFC. I think it'll be really important for him to stuff the takedowns, because Ian Garry is a fighter that has shown in the past he's very comfortable taking his fighters, his respective opponents, to the ground. And Ian Garry has a 54.55 overall takedown average when he landing takedowns on his respective opponents. So I think Carlos Prates needs to do a really good job stuffing the takedowns, being alert of what Ian Garry could provide, or what he could dish out, I should say, on the ground against Carlos Prates. So that's going to be a really important game plan. Next, I think he's going to have to walk down Ian Garry. Now, what I mean by that is Ian Garry is a fighter that likes to be the aggressor. But if Carlos Prates can put the pressure on Ian Garry, force Ian Garry to fight off the back foot, and I think that's something that Carlos Prates would like to do, because if you guys watch his previous fights or watch the film of him, he likes to walk his opponents down, and he likes to put the pressure on them so he control the tempo and the pace of the fight offensively. So I think that's something that Carlos Prates wants to do. Also, I think Carlos Prates needs to switch stances a lot. That's something that he does a lot in the octagon. That's his bread and butter. He's known for switching stances in the octagon, fighting in a distance as well. When he can fight in a distance, that's where he can land the leg kicks, whether he's trying to hit you in the face, the head, leg kicks to the body, to the calves. And he does a great job coming in, landing those vicious knee strikes to the torso, to the ab area, to the head as well. And that's where he's successful, landing 1-2 combinations as well. So I think that's going to be very important for Carlos Prates to do during this fight. But those are the following game plans that I have for Carlos Prates to follow if he wants to win this fight against Ian Garry this weekend at UFC Fight Night. Now, starting off with Ian Garry. Ian Garry's going to have to take advantage of the cardio advantage. And what I mean by that is Ian Garry probably has one of the best cardiovascular endurance gas tanks in this welterweight division. And truthfully, Ian Garry has proven that he has no problem going into the deep waters of fights, whether they are 3-round fights, 5-round fights. He has no problem going the distance in fights. And he's never been finished. So Ian Garry, if he could tap into that cardiovascular endurance, his gas tank, and take Carlos Prates to the deep waters, I think that the longer the fight goes on, it has to favor Ian Garry, because that he has the advantage of going into the deep waters in fights. Carlos Prates, since joining the UFC, he's only been there for 5 fights, but his average fights normally end between the first and second round, and he has not proven to go into deep waters of fights just yet. So the longer the fight goes on, I truly believe it does favor Ian Garry here. Next, Ian Garry is going to have to use his MMA IQ. And don't get me wrong, Carlos Prates is very intelligent in that octagon as well. But I favor Ian Garry and the MMA IQ, because even though Carlos Prates has been successful outside the UFC, Ian Garry has had the advantage in terms of experience. He has the advantage in the experience category, fighting guys like MVP. And even though he lost and losing ever against Shavkat Rakhmonov, he gave him everything that he can handle. In my opinion, Shavkat Rakhmonov is one of the best welterweights in this welterweight division right now. So I think the advantage standpoint for experience goes in the favor of Ian Garry for this fight. and he has to use that. And last but not least, I think Ian Garry's got to use his overall background, use everything in his arsenal, in his toolbox to get past Carlos Prates. Ian Garry, like I said in the beginning of the segment, he's not the flashiest fighter. He's not somebody that's going to make you jump out of your seat when you watch him, but he's a polished MMA fighter. He has the striking background. He has great footwork to move around and fight in different angles in the octagon. He has a great wrestling background as well. I keep going back to the UFC 310 co-main event, but he also was this close to putting away Shavkat Rakhmonov and losing effort in the fifth and final round with that devastating choke that he had him pinned and isolated on the mats in the octagon. So I think Ian Garry is really successful on the ground, and if he could take Carlos Prates to the ground and have the advantage in the ground control, whether it's mount control, side control, have his way with them, I think this leans more towards Ian Garry if he could do everything that I just said, use everything in his arsenal, in the striking department, the wrestling department, uses great footwork, fighting different angles. I think he has the advantage over Carlos Prates heading into this fight for UFC Fight Night. So those are my game plans for these two respective fighters. But with that being said, I'm going to go with Ian Garry to defeat Carlos Prates by decision in the main event of UFC Fight Night this weekend, taking place in the UFC world. Now, Ian Garry and Carlos Prates, I think this is going to be a highly anticipated welterweight fight. I think this is going to show you a glimpse of the future of how bright this welterweight division could truly be. I think there's a lot of talent in this welterweight division right now, but Ian Garry and Carlos Prates are going to show how great this welterweight division could be. I see this fight going in two different directions. Either Ian Garry is going to win this fight by decision, or Carlos Prates is going to win this fight by a finish in the first or second round. That's the only way I can see this fight going. But I think this is a 50-50 fight. I just trust Ian Garry more because I think he has the overall better background in MMA over Carlos Prates. I trust the overall skill set of Ian Garry over Carlos Prates. I trust Ian Garry in the striking department. I trust Ian Garry's great footwork. I believe that Ian Garry could fight at different angles and win the counter-punching battle against Carlos Prates. I trust him in the grappling department as well. If Ian Garry can find a way to take down Carlos Prates, Carlos Prates is really good at stuffing takedowns. But if Ian Garry can get home, land the takedowns, frustrate Carlos Prates, keep him grounded on the ground, this could go in a way to have the judges believe that Ian Garry is going to win this fight by decision, by racking up points, by landing significant strikes, keeping Carlos Prates grounded on the ground, and fighting his type of fight. He's a crafty fighter that is not a flashy guy that gets the finishes, but he's somebody that does a great job of frustrating his opponents, winning the counter-punching battle, landing more significant strikes, frustrating his opponents on the ground. I think Ian Garry has a really good chance of defeating Carlos Prates in this fight, and that's who I'm going to go with for Fight Night. I'm going with Ian Garry over Carlos Prates. But that is my fight prediction for this weekend's fight taking place at the welterweight division between Ian Garry and Carlos Prates.